Hello everyone. I'm going to respond to a comment left by Roger Strite. The comment is as follows, and it's beneath my What is the Alt-Right video. He says, would that soft split on the alt-right between white nationalism and reaction be best described as a modernist right versus traditionalist right split? The modernists adopting some traditional/reactionary positions, but with most of its views coming from nationalism, as you pointed out, Darwinism, biology, sociology, anthropology, psychology, etc., while the traditionalists reach similar positions by very different paths, or focus on different things like tradition, spirituality, religion, history, culture, etc. So are modernist right, traditionalist right good terms? It would be a good video to make on a introduction series of sorts to explain the variance, especially to newcomers or those not aware of it. Yeah, this is interesting. The alt-right is a community, as I said. It really is. It's a network. It's a spider web. It isn't a cohesive ideology. There are more cohesive parts of this community which are more uniform ideologically, etc. So, for example, the readership of the right stuff tends to be, and the contributors to that blog tend to be white nationalists, American white nationalists. With Countercurrents, you have a similar thing, although there is more an interest in history and to some extent kind of philosophy as well. But yeah, you look at certain websites, certain kind of sub communities, and you do see people, um, acting in different ways and all the rest of it. And I do think one of the largest kind of divides within the community at large exists between white nationalists, or nationalists more generally, and reactionaries, or traditionalists. I don't like using the term traditionalist because it's kind of it's more a descriptive word, not so much a way of thinking or an ideology per se. But we could just say between nationalists and reactionaries. Um, yeah, this is a huge, huge schism, basically. I'm definitely on the reactionary side of the fence. Obviously, the biggest divide between the two camps is the response to, I suppose, race in a roundabout way. I think it does come down to race. The nationalists believe that race is the primary, the issue of the day, so to speak, and that the way to solve issues of culture and morality, etc., is through considering race. And for the most part, their understanding of race and approach to race is biological, is modern, is materialistic, is based upon anthropology, etc. Whilst the reactionaries, of course, do consider questions of race. So do the nationalists often consider questions of culture and so on. But for the reactionaries, it's the inner dimension of man, the morality of man, the behavior and culture of a man. These are the ways in which the race question is sorted, as well as everything else. So that's kind of the biggest clear divide you have within the alt-right proper. And of course, here we are not talking about cultural libertarians. We're not talking about Milo Yiannopoulos or Gavin McInnes or Breitbart or any of these other kind of ordinary kind of right wingers. We're talking about this dissident, ideological kind of community on the internet. But yeah, that's a fair distinction to make. Obviously, like I said, I am on the reactionary side. I've answered this question about race many times, and I've gone over it in many instances. Um, as for the term modernist right and traditionalist right, um, I can understand why you would use those terms, but I wouldn't use them. The terms left and right arose really in English Parliament to describe those who sat on the right hand of the Majesty and the left hand. So the right supported the actions of the monarch, and the left respectfully declined or disagreed. And this came to mean basically conservatives and liberals, those who were more attached to the past and its structures, and those who were progressives, those who favoured breaking from the past, and so on and so forth. And of course, now we have these two huge umbrella terms, right wing and left wing, which dominate modern political discourse. Now, in my opinion, and I think it is a reactionary position, that the terms left and right wing are non-existent in traditional forms of civilization. From a reactionary point of view, and this is the whole purpose of the neo-reactionary project, is to basically have a state where there are no differentiated interests. You have the state, which is the state. There is no left wing, there is no right wing. There are no two parties. You can look to Mencius Moldbug and the rest of the guys with neo-reaction for more in-depth analysis of that kind of thing. Personally, I don't consider myself a neo-reactionary, and I haven't read too much of Moldbug, Land, etc. So I can't comment too much on that theory per se. But I do know that is the basics of neo-reactionary philosophy. They wish to go beyond left and right and achieve political harmony within modernity and within the modern age, using its technology, social technology, etc. To what we describe as a traditional, and I'm going to use the word traditional here with a capital T, in the sense of the perennial tradition, in the sense of what people like Julius Evola, Rene Guénon, Ananda Coomaraswamy, Frithjof Schuon, Mircea Eliade, etc. Things they wrote about fall beneath the bracket of tradition, and man, primordial man, ancient man, true man, as he is organically conceived, understands that life is fundamentally religious, and this is reflected in his social order. So this is where the justification for theocracy comes from, and for imperium, etc. Because through the participation in the glory of an empire, in the Roman sense, for example, man touches the divine and is ruled by principles which transcend the material world. This is the world of tradition, and what is beyond what we perceive as the right wing. We can look at things from a spectrum. So, if we look to ancient Rome and much of prehistory, you see traditionalism, insomuch as man ruled by and governed by principles which transcend him and exist in a supernatural dimension, or in an invisible dimension, or in the spiritual realm as it's perceived, fit for different cultures and different time periods and different groups of people. And basically, the modern world is the antithesis to that. So leftism, progressivism, is directly antithetical to the traditional order, whereby man is ordered according to metaphysical principles. In modernity, the exact opposite is true. This is why the left tends to egalitarianism, and why progress is ultimately about egalitarianism, because one wishes to erase order and to erase the notion of an above, the notion of a religious truth or a transcendental truth. This is where left and right break down, because one realizes that left and right they exist within modernity. Both left and right are progressive. The paradigm of left and right is a progressive paradigm, which is antithetical to tradition and to what we would see and coin a reactionary position. Reactionary, of course, being a term used to describe those individuals who oppose the French Revolution and its three idealisms: liberty, equality, fraternity. So that's the sort of that's the gist of my kind of approach to that sort of matter, which is why I think reactionaries do tend to talk about culture and religion, because these are things which one has a direct hand in. I, as an individual, can understand religious truth and it can affect me. Culture is efficacious at the individual level. I can partake in and create culture. I can embody it. It can manifest through me. And of course, a reactionary cannot be a reactionary without having a ultimately transcendental understanding of reality. That man is subordinate to God, however God is understood, whether it's Brahma or God or whatever, or Allah or whatever. So again, the authors I mentioned, Evola, Guénon, etc. Those are the people who one should read and look up if one is interested in tradition and in an authentic reactionary position. I do think, however, though, at the end of the day, terms like reactionary and calling oneself a traditionalist, they lose their meaning once one gets to the end of the road. I am Adam Wallace. I'm English. I would traditionally, if I lived in a traditional civilization as it's perceived, again we're using traditional here with a capital T, I would know my history, I would know my culture, I would be of it, and I would have a direct connection to God, whether it was through an exoteric culture or through esotericism. I would, as a man, be realized and be fully actualized in my identity as an Englishman, in my being of a particular continuum, in my being of a particular theed and family, and in my particular understanding of God fit for my race and fit for my caste. So when one really gets to that sort of level, I suppose, calling oneself a reactionary or whatever loses significance. I just am Adam Wallace. I am interested in truth and in matters of beauty and of serenity and of harmony. This naturally manifests at the political level of what we would label a reactionary or traditionalist or monarchical or empire sort of system. And everything which doesn't fall beneath that category is degenerative, progressive, and modern, and insufficient. I've made many criticisms of white nationalists, and many who are kind of within my milieu have, and not to attack. We don't want to just mindlessly critique like Marxists. We wish to see people fully realized. We wish to see people know themselves and to have a reason to actually exist. Modernity is not a problem just because of immigrants and Jews. It is far more than that. The existential crisis of man, best epitomized by Nietzsche's God is Dead, is something which extends beyond demographic questions, beyond metapolitical questions, and so on and so forth. It's an all-encompassing crisis, which is efficacious both at the political, cultural, and collective level, as well as the inner, interior, personal, and religious level of man. Ultimately, the view of someone like myself who would be lumped under the reactionary or traditionalist label by other people, that is my approach. So, I think I've said everything that needs to be said. Thank you for listening.